All right. So this Dharma talk is about my zazen practice, but it's also a discussion of case 12 of the Mumonkan. And I try and tie the two together. And what I do here is give you a bit of a cross section of my mind during a very conflicted zazen period, but also correlate that back to a koan and maybe experiences we all have. So let's go. So before we begin, I will say that this koan is about a Zen master called Zuigan. Uh, I think his Chinese name was Orion Xian. And not much is known about him, but we know that his master died at about 900. So it was quite a while back. And the name of this case is case 12 of the Mumonkan. Zuigan calls his own master. So Zuigan Genosho called to himself every day, Master, and answered, Yes, sir. Then he would say, Be wide awake, and answer, Yes, sir. Henceforward, never be deceived by others. No, I won't. Mumon's comment, Old Zuigan buys and sells himself. He takes out a lot of God masks and devil masks and puts them on and plays with them. What for? Eh? One calling and the other answering, one wide awake and the other saying he will never be deceived. If you stick to any of them, you will be a failure. If you imitate Zuigan, you will play the fox. Then Muban has one incredible capping verse here. Clinging to the diluted way of consciousness, students of the way do not realize truth. The seed of birth and death through endless eons. The fool calls it the original self. All right. Well, that's a lot and sort of a dramatic koan, but very interesting. And one I think about often because it seems obvious, but like most koans, maybe it has several different interpretations. So I was having great difficulty sitting after the election. My thoughts were coming fast and furious, and I was looking for a creative outlet to get my mind under control. I have been thinking about documenting the iterative chain of thoughts that popped up during my zazen. And I wrote down these condensed thoughts that arose during a 25-minute meditation session. While writing this, I uncovered a strong corollary to case 12 of the Mumonkan, which I just read as the introduction to this Dharma talk with a bit of commentary. I will discuss the koan in greater detail a little later. Please understand that I only wrote down the small mind portion of my zazen, if you wish to believe me. I will tell you that the balance of my zazen period was interspersed with brief, deep sessions of emptiness. That's a joke. Please note that this is not an anomaly. The voices are not the anomaly, the emptiness is. The following is my writing during my meditation session. So I sit down to meditate, but restlessness washes over me as I try to focus on my breath. Random images surface unbidden. One of them is Joseph de Ganji, my childhood neighbor. In my mind, he appears as if he was 18, and then curiously, he ages 20 years in an instant. Interesting to note, I have not seen him since he was 18. I inhale deeply, attempting to fill my abdomen with breath and bring attention to my third eye while tuning into my tinnitus, a sound that grounds me and connects me to the present moment. Editorial note, tinnitus is always there, and in its way, it keeps me anchored when everything else drops away. So that's usually my first marker that I'm coming into the present moment. I start counting my breaths, but a melody interrupts. The music of Everlast is playing in my mind. Then another image flashes, Steven Tyler performing a split in black and white. Ram Dass's words echo in my consciousness. Don't step over the present moment to get to the next. I remind myself to choose this moment, to embrace it fully. The tinnitus hums louder, drawing my awareness. Can you be here now? I inquire to myself. I tell myself, only your mind is moving. My mind drifts, and I tell myself that suffering is caused by attachment, clinging and wanting things to be different than they are. And another random thought arrives, Shaggy and Scooby-Doo, and of course I visualize them. Breathe, breathe, just breathe. I try to let my awareness sink into my abdomen, but another image appears. Garfield, the cartoon cat, lazily napping in a tree. Consciousness, awareness, nothingness, these concepts swirl around as I hold my attention on non-duality, trying to be one. I tell myself that everything is as it is, and I return to my breath. Deeper now, layers and layers down. My ego reappears, wondering how this Dharma talk might be received. Part of me anticipates praise, imagining my words being called insightful. Another part fears failure. I give myself credit for understanding that they co-arise together. I feel the tension in my chest and head, a pulsating pressure. Can I let it all go? I ask myself. No attachment. I breathe, and then I see an image of a tarot card, the cat in the hat of all things. So it would seem as if I were an insane person. I seem highly conflicted, maybe. There are so many voices and only one brain. Could this be a mental condition like schizophrenia? This brief insight into my neurons would be what a psychologist would call the brain's default mode network, or what a Buddhist would call the small mind. Yes, this is my default operating system, and guess what? Probably yours too. Let's be honest, right? It's hard to meditate. It's hard to bring people into the Zendo and ask them to sit in front of a wall for hours and let it go. I attempted to document the goat rodeo that goes on in my mind during zazen on a particularly strenuous day. And now I am attempting to correlate that hall of mirrors called my default mode network with case 12 of the Mumonkan. So Freud called the components of our personality the ego, the superego, and id. New Age terminology deemed these inner voices the neutral witness and the controller. The Buddha addresses these conditions of mind in his talk on non-self, and he does it pretty succinctly. These 5 skandhas are aggregated and includes the mental formation of consciousness. And as we all know from the Heart Sutra, all 5 skandhas are empty. So all 5 skandhas are impermanent. They don't exist. To cut to the punchline about the teaching on non-self, all of these mental formations are impermanent and we can't control them. My brief period of sitting, which had many moments that were quite blissful, seemed quite the contrary when I just condensed down the moments where my mind wandered. My mind is constantly shifting, always questioning. Voices, thoughts, ephemeral yet persistent. This is consciousness, and consciousness is ever changing. We are part of consciousness, but we do not control consciousness. Science has no idea what consciousness is precisely, how it is brought into existence, and through what method we all share this experience. And this experience of consciousness is that feeling that something's happening, this experience called consciousness. So let me get back to this koan and try to tie everything together. Is this monk crazy? Is Zuigan crazy? Or is he a mirror reflecting our own delusions? He seeks to awaken us through unconventional methods, shouts, humor, psychosis, and rudeness. In Mumonkan, case 12, when Zuigan says, do not be deceived by others, it means don't be fooled by appearances or external influences, and instead trust your inner understanding and insight. Essentially, don't let others manipulate your perception of reality. I like that explanation, but I think that there's a much deeper level to this koan. It seems like a straightforward message when Zuigan tells us not to take things at face value. Perhaps this is a message in non-duality. Who is he really being deceived by? Is Zuigan the one who is deluded? The koan includes a fox analogy, the metaphor of a fox disguising itself as something it's not, representing how someone might try to deceive others with false appearances. Maybe we fool ourselves sometimes, perhaps, or all the time. Maybe we even believe that this fox exists. Do you see the fox for what it truly is? Mumonkan says, if you imitate Zuigan, you will play the fox. There is a message of self-reliance within this koan, as we know that Zuigan is his own master. He tells us this. Buddha tells us we must have great faith and great doubt. Zuigan tells us not to blindly follow others. On the surface, this koan is telling us to go beyond concepts and not to get caught up in clinging to specific ideas or teachings, but to see them through to the nature of reality. However, Mumonkan writes in his commentary, he said, you must pay attention to the detail. And so this koan is not what it seems to be. And Mumonkan points to this. He says, and this is particularly true where Mumonkan speaks of puppet shows and masks. And this is an obvious metaphor. Who is this true man that Mumonkan speaks of? Is this true man one who wears multiple masks, lives in a puppet show, and believes that this is reality? Does the true man believe his own delusion? The true man is unborn. The next comment by Mumonkan is prescient, but timeless, because it really suits our existence today. Some Zen students do not realize the true man in the mask, and I'm reading the capping phrase again, because they recognize ego soul. Ego soul is the seed of birth and death, and foolish people call it the true man. Okay. Well, that's all I got.
Thank you very much for that. Mike.
With was that recorded?
Yes.
I hope so.
Yeah, that was recorded. Hold on, let me double check. And yep, still recording.
Peter
And it will
will
be held against you for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I felt like I let out the big secret of what's going on in our brains that nobody wants to talk about.
Well, yours at least.
At least mine, right? Yeah, and that's the irony, isn't it? Yeah, there's the paradox.
Well, I liked your talk because of what happened a couple of weeks ago. My brain has been all over the place, from really absolutely crazy to shut up, Michael, let it go, let's see where this all goes and stuff. And one of the things I hope I understood your talk right is that don't be quick to judge and don't be fooled. Be analyze. It's one of the things about Buddhism I discovered is we're responsible for ourselves. We're responsible for how we think, how we interact, how we perceive and stuff. But it is the toughest task I've ever encountered in my life, in the sense that, like you say, if I sit down to do zazen, I'm in the middle of a freeway. Things are going back and forth at high speed and stuff. And it's nice to know that somebody else kind of goes through the same thing. And it actually was a very helpful talk, because it kind of helps give me tools to deal with it and just understand that, hey, the brain thinks, that's what it does, but don't get fooled by it. Figure it out. Be responsible for your own actions and figure it out and be honest with yourself. And I hope that's part of what you were trying to say.
Yeah, I think you were in the strike zone there. You know, Zuigan doesn't think his mind is his mind, so he's playing a game. He's having this inner dialogue outwardly, and other people think what they want, but he's not two, he's one, right? And I think with this, if we could just see through those voices and be one, and be in the present, we could alleviate a lot of stress in our lives. And I think this helps me if I'm able to get there when I have particularly difficult zazen. As you could see, maybe 5-10 minutes of my zazen was this inner dialogue. The rest was counting and breath as normal, right? But you gotta that's what's happening. And that's what was happening with Zuigan on, more of a curated level, let's say. Rachel?
I tell myself to shut up out loud. And I think my neighbors must think I'm crazy, because I'll sit there and get a weird talk of, Mike, shut up. And it's like, oh, there's Mike again talking to himself.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't tell myself to shut up. I would say, do not be deceived by others.
Thank you.
So,
Rachel?
Spencer. Yesterday I found a poem by a Polish poet I like quite a bit, which I had not read. And she's dead. She got a Nobel Prize, but her name's hard to pronounce. Wisla Zimborska. Anyway, she has one line that says, "There is so much everything that nothing is hidden quite nicely." Does that in some ways reference um, much of what you were referencing?
yeah, I mean, hidden in plain sight, right? Yeah. And we don't acknowledge it, but that's our practice, is to work through that and to let it all go. And right there, it's always right there, right? It's always right there, but can we get there? We've got to get through all that stuff, but we get there, right? And then it's good.
Donna.
Hi,
Hi.
I I'm um, I'm honored to have been a participant in a few moments of your zazen, and I wonder how in the world you could record that. Did you just remember it all afterwards, or did you actually like stop, write it down, and go back into meditation?
I've been threatening myself to do it for a long time, and I think it hit its apex at the election. And I said, you know what? I just put my phone on dictation. I set my meditation timer and I started counting. Stuff popped into my head. I just parroted that back down. And, you got the edited version, let's say.
And the second question is just a basic Zen question, but how did you keep from being interested in every image and what it meant and where it came from and what it meant to you? And
it was all mind. It was all ego. The whole thing was an exercise in ego. But I wanted to do it because I think this happens to all of us. People get frustrated in their practice. I think other people maybe are trying to sit like Mike and are having this super dense, not the normal stuff come up, but maybe 10 times that. And how do we deal with that? How do we sit through that? Is it normal? And what are our overarching goals of non-dualism and who Zuigan, his enlightenment. How do we understand that? Jane?
Thank you, Spencer. There's a lot of things there to think about. I'd like to say that what I take away from the whole talk is to trust ourselves, not to look for anything outside, but to find it right where we are as we are. So if some days we're really dense, to love that dense self and to trust it, because sometimes the best things come in through a dense self. And if we're very sharp, sometimes not to prize that self. Sorry. Not to prize that self or to try to keep it, but to just treasure what you learned from that prized self for a short moment, and then go back and be the dense, nothing special self, which is what we are most of the time. And even in our mind, when we hear wonderful songs and comments, just to trust who we are every moment without trying to be any of it for long, because we aren't any of it. We're all of it. So I thought it was a good talk, Spencer, because it really does throw all responsibility for who we are back on ourselves always. And so sometimes if you see something of great value, which looks like nothing to another person, not to be moved by what that other person sees, but to trust your own sense that, oh, this is quite valuable, and to just live with who you are totally. That's what I would say. So I really enjoyed your talk. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess it's just me and Mike that have that type of zazen.
Brothers in arms.
No, it's like my sister said to me one day, she said, I sat through a whole session singing when the red velvet goes bum bum bum.
Is it wrong to have a song go through your head while you're trying to practice zazen?
Nothing is wrong.
I think you should try to figure out what your mind's trying to say to you.
I have heard that if you've got an earworm and you sort of mentally hum the Mission Impossible theme, that it'll kind of displace the earworm without sticking itself.
Yeah, I've heard that too, and I've heard that's how Robert Kennedy became enlightened. So
Man,
Thank
it is
you.
going to be real hard to stay apolitical.
That's
the
so
next 4
compassionate.
years. Yeah.
That is just extreme. That's a big compassion.
yeah, his benefit is obvious. So,
Well,
Chris, you got anything?
no, I was going to segue into an announcement, but I don't want to rush anyone. So if anyone wants to add thoughts or ask Spencer to talk some more. Oh, there we go, Steve. Yeah. Still muted, Steve.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
I'm okay now. All right. It only, yeah, you'd think I'd figure this out after a few years. But anyway, thank you, Spencer. I appreciate everything you talked about. My mind at times during sitting, like everybody else's, I don't get cartoons, but I get a lot of static and things to where sometimes, like Mike says, I tell myself to shut up, but I've also told myself we've already been through this, because it's usually something that isn't settled in my life, something that I've created that now I have to think my way through the solving of it, when in actuality, thinking doesn't really do a whole lot. And I know that, so I talk back to myself and say, we already went through this. Let's leave that alone. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So it's like anything else. But I like the way you tied everything in. And the only question I do have, and maybe you could answer this, is, I hear the delusion of birth and death a lot. Or the illusion, whatever. I sometimes think that if I become enlightened, then birth and death goes away, but it's a reality that I live in. So I don't quite understand the whole birth and death thing.
Well, I think, with things like that, you have to look into how things are born and originated. So, everything is dependently originated, right? So there's not a thing in this world that we could point to, even an atom, that's not derived from something else, right? Okay. So all of that was born at some time, right? Okay, but all of that is sort of unborn too, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
by death, I guess.
No, it's unborn because it's timeless, and so are we, because that's what we are, and that's what we're connected to, and that's what zazen is. And when you sit, and the more you sit, it's like old movies, I think, were like 12 frames per second. And now high resolution is 100, 1,000 slow motion, right? And the more you sit, maybe when you first sat, you could only see 12 frames or 1 frame of what was going on in your mind. But maybe you start to see 24 frames, which is much higher resolution. And then you get into like Super 8. So you see more, and you'll get a frame of something. And then it's more stuff to let go. You just see that, all this stuff was coming up and I didn't know. And I thought that was me, and you let it go because it's nothing and there's nothing to attain. And it's the same thing with birth and death, because sometimes I'm very concerned about it, but sometimes I see it for the conversation that it is in my brain. Okay. And when I can get to that place, it's a very strong place in my practice, but it's not often. So, Jane, do you have a comment on the great matter? Because it's a big
Great
topic.
matter of birth and death.
Yes.
Yeah, the great matter of birth and death is for us to understand what you just said, that we are timeless. And we are moving in a timeless situation, although we don't see it because our mind is so stuck on beginning and endings that we believe that if we have a self, we know that it ends and it begins, and the self isn't a timeless part of us. The self is the construct that we put on top of this timeless being that we are, and this timeless time that we are is all the things that we put upon it to create a world that we think this is really true. And what did you say earlier about deconstructing everything? Yeah, we are always deconstructing when we sit in meditation, because for a short time we stop constructing. For a short time we just breathe. And during that time we deconstruct much of our confusion in ideas about the world is this way and I am this way. So the great matter of birth and death is that we're living in a deathless frame, as it were, trying to create sense out of it. And it's very difficult for us to do because we don't understand our timelessness. And so we're always going to make a world out of our imagination. But someone told me not so long ago, when I was so worried about Peter and I was constructing that, and he said, why don't you just, when you start feeling worried, just look at it as a strand of something and don't grab it with your mind and start carrying it away with imagination. Yeah. And I thought that was really good advice, and it really helped me through the worst time with Peter. So every time I started to feel worried about where things were going, I would see that little strand there and say, no, don't grab it, don't touch it. Because that was just another construction on top of a timeless moment. But I was trying to freeze the moment because I was so scared about what was happening to Peter. And I have to tell you all that he's doing very well now after having been through a very tough time. He's now going to be sent back over to the Canyon Oaks nursing home because he's gotten so much better. He was lucky because he had a doctor who just wouldn't give up on him. Yeah, and there was a really scary time for everybody because for a while he couldn't even construct a sentence. When he was talking to people, he was like off in the blue all the time. And the doctor figured out what it was finally, and he gave him a drug for it to get rid of this influence of Ambien. Mm. And as soon as he gave it to him, 5 minutes later, Peter was back. So he's back enough now that they're sending him back to the nursing home. Woo!
Excellent.
But for about 4 days, I was literally holding my breath and trying to remember not to grab that one strand of worry and build on it.
Yeah.
So I think the matter of birth and death is first that we weren't born, but we like to think we were. And if we're born, we will die, but we're not born. And we do live in a timeless zone, but the construct that we've made, the Jane that sits here is a fabrication of me, and that part of me will die, and the whole world that was connected to it will die. It's my belief. If anyone knows better, tell me.
To sort of build on what Jane just said, when I think about consciousness, I think consciousness is sort of eternal, right? We're born into it. We don't know how we come out of it, but it's this stream of consciousness, right? And it's eternal. Small mind thinks that we're at the center of consciousness and we're eternal, but we're only part of consciousness, which is eternal. It's only the ego which has the ego soul, which we talk about in that koan, that has the audacity to think that it is at the center of consciousness, when we are all just part of that great stream, right? And you know, that's a framework of mind that maybe you got to work into. So,
No, that's, thank you, Spencer. I think maybe you should talk to the great matter. That's very well said, I think.
yeah, I mean, I think about it. I mean, and then I have to rationalize it. So that's at least my rationalization. So.
That's a good comment about we are not at the center, and we would like to believe we are.
Well, I just wanted to say, in defense of the ego, it really looks like it is the center.
Yeah.
To the ego, it looks like it's the center. So
It
I mean,
does.
what is he going to do?
Yeah,
Well, you're
I mean,
gonna tell it to
Yeah.
get
Well,
off the
to the-
stage.
Just stop feeding it.
Just tell it to shut up.
Yeah. Or just be like, I mean, the other thing is I started to feel bad for the ego hearing, because the great self is timeless. The great self is, unborn, infinite, whatever. The ego doesn't last very long compared to that. It has such a small amount of time in the great scheme of things. So it's kind of like, oh, poor little thing.
Well, actually, Chris, I think the ego can be an ally or it can be our worst nightmare. But I think when it's awakened enough, it can be a wonderful ally in the way we live.
Good to cultivate, cooperate.
Yeah.
I think it's a good tool, right? But in the koan, he says, what does he say exactly? Hold on, he says, and foolish people call it the true man, right? And that's really what society is today. I mean, look who is exalted. Look what attributes are exalted. The most base ego, promoting capitalistic, that's what we call the true man today, but that is not the true man of Zen, right? And Zuigan understands that. That is not the true man.
True man is your eternal man.
Yes, everlasting. Mitch, what do you got?
A couple of things, actually. There's an old, at least I've heard it before, that death is only a concept. And like everything that subject to arising is subject to ceasing. So that concept will pass as well. And it's that ego-driven centricity of ours, self-centricity that we fear. Another one of the saying that I like is that only the living worry about death.
If that gives you comfort, something my teacher told me, Peter, I think when asked, what's death like? And he was sort of jovial. Oh, I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm alive.
I remember that.
Think about it.
Can I raise one more? Can I change this?
You're alive, you're alive, you're alive, and then you're dead.
Do we have time to talk about one more thing?
Sure.
So we all have those times where in zazen that we're present, we're counting our breaths, and then the next minute we have something through your head that takes you away. And I try to deal with that transition from being centered to being diluted or losing the present moment. And I'd like to ask people about anything they understand about that transition. Why do we lose it? Where does it come from? That transition?
You're talking about when we transition into thought from the
Yeah.
breath.
Yeah. You're sitting there doing fairly well in your zazen, and you follow your breath, and all of a sudden, I run dramas through my little scenarios, little dramettes or whatever. You talk about cartoons. Other people have different ways of. I worry, I start dealing with my to-do lists or something.
Yeah, and
It's that
and then
transition that I'd really like to know something about that transition.
no, and then we judge ourselves about it. Like I judge my zazen. Wow, I didn't catch that right away. And I think it's sort of like an arc. Like maybe this isn't Zen, but if like you shoot skeet, it goes up in the air, and you want to get it low, right? Like right when it comes up. But sometimes there's too much going on, and it's at its apex, that idea. And now you're well into your laundry list, you're buying antacids, and you still don't get it. And that clay falls and hits the ground. You catch the next one. That's what happens. But my thing is, I judge myself on it. Like, oh, I didn't get it at the beginning. I got it at the end, or I got the third thought in a chain. I got some extrapolated idea that's now a concept. Your Zen is not so good, kid. That's how my brain works.
Or maybe it's like a dog, running along and having a good time, and then suddenly says squirrel. And he goes, but he doesn't judge himself about it.
Bacon. Yeah.
Wow.
So
I was thinking about Brussels sprouts and bacon and a balsamic reduction in goat cheese during zazen today.
Oh my goodness.
That's what I'm thinking about making for a
thank you.
Friendsgiving get
I think we're going to
together.
have that for dinner.
Yeah.
If I remember right, I think, was it Senator Suzuki said, chicken taze, the thoughts are going through your brain. You go in one door and you go out the other door. The only thing is you don't serve it tea as it goes by. Just let it come in, let it go out.
I've also heard that said that the more experienced you are with zazen, the shorter those periods of non-zazen are recognized, and you go back to your zazen.
Yeah. I think the more you practice, like I was speaking with Steve, you're able to see more delineation and let it all go. Okay. That's all it is. You just maybe have a greater ability to let more go. And before, maybe some stuff was sort of sticking, maybe some amyloid proteins were sticking to your neurons or something. I don't know. But you have the ability to consciously let it go.
Yeah, but what we let go of, if I can remember what I was just going to say, when we let go of things, the whole point of this practice is to just take inventory, and learn whatever is there, what all of it is, the worst of the best, and really look at it. But to let it all go finally in the end, let all of it go, and hopefully will one day drop off mind and body as well. So it's not to judge ourselves, but to just know everything. This, like you have this wonderful box, and you take everything out and look at it. Some of it you like, some of it you don't like, but it's all full of stuff. So you just take it in, then you put the box back away, put the lid back on it, and shove it under the bed again.
Seems like non-discriminating makes it easier to let go, because if you're not even paying attention to what it is, you don't give yourself a chance to attach to it.
Well, that's like saying you run through things so fast you don't get attached to it.
Yeah.
If you want to really know what's there, because what is it? Big delusions is a big Buddha.
Big, big delusion, big enlightenment, something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But so the thing is not to pass by it fast, is to dwell on it just long enough to really let it affect you and your whole being, and then let go of it.
Well, thank you very much, Spencer.
Yeah, thank you, Spencer. What a good talk.